and welcome to Mental Health. It's a Trap. We're your hosts, Susan and Stephen, mother and son, unraveling the complexities of the mental health traps people fall in. Join us on this podcast journey as we demystify the mental health labyrinth, explore common issues, and provide you with tools to navigate this sometimes extremely daunting terrain. You can expect engaging conversations, personal stories, and probably also have a laugh or two. Access to mental health care should not be what causes you additional stress. We invite you to follow along, and together we can embrace the darkness.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. We have phenomenal guests with us. We have Dr. Liz with Essential Healing, and we are so grateful to have her on today to kind of share a little bit about her story. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of professionals who might feel stuck and feel they're on the hamster wheel. And maybe they're looking for something new, whether it's a training or maybe even a different path on to how they can align or attune to their true calling and find what kind of like what we're always looking for, right? That passion or that purpose. And maybe this is the episode that you've been waiting for. So we have again Dr. Liz with Essential Healing. And why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. So I'm Dr. Liz Winders, and I am a retired clinical psychologist turned energy healer. And my path to getting there was a medical trauma that I experienced during the birth of my daughter that really began to open up all of our traumas that can happen. And so I went on a healing journey seeking, traditional modalities, alternative modalities, and about 4 years in, found a couple of techniques that had a profound impact on my own healing. And then I immediately got certified and started practicing on my willing participants in my therapy practice. And I watched them get better faster. And so I was at this place of, I don't think I can be a therapist anymore. So in 2018, I retired. I let my license expire and I opened up Essential Healing with Dr. Liz.
That is
Um,
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
And what are some of the modalities that you kind of dipped into that are different in terms of the healing space?
Sure. So I tried everything under the sun, the Reiki, the access bars. I saw shamans, and I thought they were all really wonderful tools, but it wasn't until I found emotion code and body code.
Mm.
This is Dr. Brad Nelson's work, that I had this really profound impact. And I think there was part of me and my own psychology that liked these techniques because they're pretty structured. There's a formula. There is even an app for body code.
Mhm.
And it was similar to what you might see in like a CBT protocol or an ACT protocol, like you do this thing. And so it allowed me to step into a process that felt familiar, um, and was really doable. And, of course, since then, I've taken a much deeper dive into the world of, energy and healing and, super woo-woo stuff, and have done over 10 different modalities, the most recent one being the Tolpacan method,
Mhm.
which I can talk in more detail about, but that's kind of the gist.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing because one of our podcast episodes, we talk about how people should consider trying different things because, we have this mindset of doctors and medication, and then therapy is kind of like like if the seed is planted and grows enough, then they're like, okay, now I'll try it when it's like way past when, they probably should have gotten into therapy to get that support.
Mhm.
And but also the push of like I don't want to do these things because they are too wooey or spiritual and I'm not that kind of person. And it's almost like that inner resistance, right? Of like maybe like a part of them knows like this could work for them, but then it's like I don't want to go there or it's unfamiliar. So like there's like that push and that pull. And so I think that's an awesome kind of reminder for people is like some things work, some things don't, and you never know what's gonna help unless you are a little bit open to like trying different things.
Yeah. And I think that, when you're in a state of like being on the hamster wheel of, whatever flavor your pain and suffering is, being in that space and the medication isn't doing what it's supposed to do, even the therapy is not doing what it's supposed to do, that people are more inclined to step out and try something because they're tired of their suffering. And so I see people like that in my practice who have never seen an energy practitioner before, but they're like, well, what do I have to lose?
Mhm.
And I think that's important because we get into these very traditional settings of how we help people without really stepping out of the box itself and saying there's other methods or other modalities or other ways. And I think I see this more of a trend of body work and kind of healing the body as well as the mind and even spiritually. And so I think it's important for people to know that there are a lot of different opportunities out there. And I did the traditional and still do more of the traditional therapy. And we have our own modalities of CBT, DBT, IFS, and all of those different types of treatments to help people. And and sometimes that if they're so structured, they don't allow for flexibility to really support people in because there's no one size fits all. We have all of these evidence-based practices, and they're great and they work for people, though they don't work for everyone. And so we'd like to at least share with people that there are so many other options and choices that they have, if they're open to looking at those.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I've found, speaking to your point, is that on a healing journey, there's a deeper reason for our pain and suffering, our trauma experiences. We're being invited to open to a level of either self-wisdom or some other version of wisdom that is available to us. And if you're not going to get it on whatever treatment journey you are on, then whatever you do isn't going to work. And so being open to trying, well, maybe I'll step in and get a Reiki session or even an acupuncture session or something like that to just see how this feels. Does it open new potential within me? Does it allow me space to feel relief? And then if it does, then you're on the right path. Right? But if you're trying the same thing over and over each week and you continue to feel the same level of, again, whatever level of pain you're at, then maybe it's time to explore.
Mhm. That almost seems like it's its own podcast in and of its own, kind of like the quote where they say like insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I think what happens is people just aren't aware. Like sometimes they know, but they're not truly aware of like what's out there and what they can try. Because maybe how are you going to look for something that you don't know what you're looking for? So,
Mhm.
one of the things that I thought about is what was kind of like, was there a defining moment between the medical trauma, trying traditional like modalities and treatments, and then going to alternative or spiritual or healing? Was there like a defining moment where you were like, it's not working, and so I'm going to try something else? Or what was that like?
So I would say that I've always been sort of open-minded to begin with. Like I was a holistic psychologist. I became a yoga teacher so that I could do mind-body practices with clients in my therapy practice. And so the connection between mind and body was already very established in my own internal wisdom. Um, and and so for me, my path was, well, I'm going to get myself into the best form of therapy I possibly can. And it was nice, it was supportive, but I wasn't seeing the change that I needed. And of course, as a psychologist, I've done tons of therapy before, so it's not like I hadn't talked about things. Um, and I just allowed myself to be open to what showed up in my world. So someone would say, oh, hey, I tried this particular thing. I remember I was visiting with a friend of mine who was a chiropractor, and she was like, I just heard about this shaman who does X, Y, and Z. And, if I would had never had that sort of experience before, and I was like, maybe that will help. And so what I did is I followed the curiosity within. So I allowed for, the universe, God, whatever it may be, spirit to show up and say, here's an opportunity. And then if I was curious about it enough, then I would schedule an appointment and try it out. And then again, settle into, well, what did I get from that? How was I able to receive? What shifted in my life? What shifted internally for me? And that allowed for each step. And I tried many, many, many things that were, again, nice and supportive until took me 4 years until I found something that was like knocked me over with how much my life shifted.
Mhm. Were there any times where you felt like giving up? Because I feel like a lot of people might try therapy and then they either have one negative experience or they have a few negative experiences and then they're like, okay, I'm all done. Was there ever a point like that when you were trying different things where you're like, oh, I just don't want to do this anymore?
Um, I would say no, because that's very much my personality.
Mm,
I always am looking for the next interesting thing, the next thing that fascinates me. And I also had this toddler running around that I was very motivated to be the best version of myself that I possibly could be.
mhm,
Um, Now I know, like for some people who depression may flavor their PTSD, that may be a different expression, but for me, it was more anxiety that flavored my PTSD. And so I was very driven to continue seeking, continue seeking. I was, you know, reading books, watching documentaries, like I was a constant consuming of information, looking for what that next piece was.
mhm. Yeah, and I really don't need to imagine because I know how difficult it can be to kind of reach out for help and to like, what can I do next? And so people who kind of get stuck in those like depressive moments or like I don't know what to do. I think that's where a lot of people are. And I think kind of like what you said is like if people can be curious. So depending on wherever the listener is listening, I would invite you to be curious about like what the next step is. And I think that's a big step in and of itself because people go to therapy and they're like, I don't know why, like, I know I need help, but I don't know why I'm here. And so the expectation is the therapist or the professional is going to cure them or fix them and everything's going to be better. And sometimes they get stuck in that, like, well, I've been going to therapy for 1 year, 2 years, and I haven't really gotten better, but I don't want to fire my therapist or I don't want to tell my therapist that it's not
Mhm.
working. So kind of again, finding that curiosity of like, do you know what you want? Do you know what the issue is? And sometimes we don't, and that's okay. But are you able to communicate that? Because I think that's if you don't, again, if you don't know, you say you don't know, and then work with the therapist. And if it's not working, like you said, like kind of find something else that's gonna work.
Yeah, we're not meant to be here in chronic states of depression. We didn't come here for that. Yes, a depressive episode or time or deep grief is part of the human experience, but we're not meant to live our entire lives in a place of constant sorrow. Like we come here for a contrast, right? So that's light and dark. So if you're not having that light, you can step into that hope of, well, just fundamentally, I came here for this. And so there's got to be something that's going to help me shift.
Yeah.
I like when you said, like, what am I getting out of this? I think that's such a critical question in terms of because people will go to therapy and they stay in it and there's really no movement. And sometimes even the therapist feels stuck and they're not having that conversation with the client, which is such a disservice, is to be able to talk about that and say, what are you getting out of this? And even as a therapist, helping them to explore what other potential things may be beneficial for them outside of the therapy modality. And just being able to be honest with oneself, right? Am I really getting anything out of sitting here every week and just talking about it, or maybe even doing some skill work or homework, which I call adventure. Kind of, it piques the curiosity in the mind. So it's interesting to see how clients go in adventure. They get all excited and I go, okay, so this is the adventure. They go, that's really homework. I go, okay, well, if I say adventure, it's all about how you perceive it in your body and your brain, right? And so I think it's really important to kind of look at, and we assess that in our lives, in our everyday lives. What am I getting out of my job? Is it the right place for me? So we can also translate that into our mental health and our whole well-being of really looking at what we might need and talking to others to see what they might think in terms of things that they've tried. And again, we don't talk about it enough. So we like poo-poo this and poo-poo that. You got to go to therapy. And again, that's not always beneficial for people.
Yeah.
So I think it's finding that path.
And I love that you said that it's an important conversation to have with your therapist. Because if you do feel like you are stuck and there's no forward progress after, an extended period of time in therapy, I would hope that your therapist is bringing it up to have the conversation. And if they're not, it's perfectly reasonable for the client to bring that up, and can dramatically shift the relationship between therapist and client so that there is more authentic connection, goal-driven action during the session, because therapists get kind of in maybe not a funk, but a routine too. Right. And so they can settle in and be like, well, this client just likes to talk about the childhood and not maybe examine or be curious about their role in wanting something more. So yes, absolutely speak up if that's the case in your therapy, because things could change for the better.
I think that's where people get stuck. Whether it's the therapist or the client, it's like the client comes in and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And the therapist is, and I think this is where it gets like muddy, because it's like, if you go to a therapist and they're like, oh, like, what are you here today? Like, what are your goals? And sometimes, again, people don't know. And obviously, it's a skill that you learn as you grow. How do you balance letting the client lead, but also having some kind of structure so that you have something, but also the ability to like not have to like stick to the structure if the client needs to go somewhere else. And like, sometimes that's difficult, because if you're a new therapist or you just graduated with your master's and you're learning, that can be a difficult place, because you might get people who are like, I don't really like you, or it didn't work out. And then that can be like, oh, well, I feel like I'm a bad therapist. And it's like, no, you're learning. And then likewise with clients, it's like going to therapy is a new thing. So it's, you're the boss too. So you can fire your therapist, but we come from this mindset of like, they're the professional, they know all the answers. So I can't, not like fight or argue, but I can't push back to like what I feel and what I want. And I have to kind of do this hierarchy kind of game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and if you go back to some of the very foundational pieces in psychotherapy before you get into like evidence-based work, what matters is the relationship. So if you can't speak up to your therapist and say, hey, what are we doing here? Like, how is this impacting me? What am I getting out of it? And this is how I feel. Then you're probably not also doing that in your romantic partnerships and your partnerships with your children or your friendships or work or anywhere else. And so I'll say it should be a safe place for you to practice that type of communication that enhances everything in life when you can have that level of honesty.
Exactly. And I think as therapists, if, we're working in that role, and our hope is that when people come to us, we can help them in whatever way that we can. And also being mindful that, it is their work. That work is done by the client, and we're the guide. We're really just guides. We don't have all the answers. We don't have magic wands. I joke with my clients. I said, if I had a magic wand, I'd use it on myself first and then share it with others. So again, because we all have our journeys in life and stories, and I think it's really important to talk about the elephant in the room. If you want your clients to come to you and share their most vulnerable parts of their journey, we need to make that space safe and be able to talk about that uncomfortableness. I do supervision towards licensure in the state of New Hampshire, and I have that conversation with the clinicians about, they're like, I'm really stuck. And I'm like, is it that you're stuck? Is it the client's stuck? And so we kind of really explore those things because, and I said, if you are feeling that, that client is feeling it probably tenfold.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about it, talk about the relationship. Is it working for them? Is it not? Because, I say this to all my clients, if it's not a good fit, I'm open to, helping you to find the person that would be a better fit for you. It's very, very, I could probably count on one hand in the years that I've been doing this, that a client has spoken up in the session because it's uncomfortable, because people take it as a personal thing. And I said, it's not personal. It's most times it's just not a good fit. The personalities aren't they don't work together well or whatever it is. So I think it's like, talk about the elephant.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
And so when it comes to the emotion and body code, how does that fit in? Is it similar? Is it different?
Well, so it's very, very different. The similar pieces is client is most of the time sitting up facing me versus some energy healing modalities. They might go lay on a massage table and the practitioner is like working over their body within their energy field. But for this work, they're sitting up facing me, and I use a technique called muscle testing, which I can explain further if you think it would be appropriate for your audience, to ask questions of the subconscious mind, looking for the energetic blocks that are preventing them from reaching their treatment goal. So, for example, if somebody has, we'll say, anxiety, I would muscle test the question, what can we clear today that is preventing client from being, I try to frame it in the positive. So being either free from anxiety, being peaceful, calm, restored, whatever is appropriate for what's going on in their life. And, depending on where we are in the progress, I might get a number like, oh, we're going to clear 16 things today, or we're just going to go to one. And then I would use, I'm sort of looking over here, I've got an emotion code chart, which people can Google if they're curious about. It's just a chart with about 60 different trapped emotions. And so if it's a trapped emotion, then I would find the trapped emotion and then use a clearing statement to clear it. And then it's kind of wash and repeat. So if I know we're doing 16 things, then I'm going to go down the line and clear those 16. Or I might ask another question, what's the next layer here? Okay, what can we clear so that, there's less anxiety at A, B, and C? Like you can get really specific or you can get really general. So my training as a psychologist was very helpful in this work because you learn how to ask really good questions and to see, the patterns that people engage in that maybe aren't supporting their goal. So that was really helpful. And of course, I still use that in my work, but I don't do any traditional psychotherapy anymore. So it's the energy healing, and then I might do some coaching, or instead of homework, I sometimes call it home play, to get people to engage in the behavior that supports whatever it is that we just cleared out. So if we cleared out the energetics, but now you still need to rewire your brain because the organ of the brain is still hardwired for the anxiety, the depression, the, whatever we're working on. Even sometimes if we're working on pain, it's still hardwired to fire in the framework of, oh, I have pain in this place because I have had it for, 15 years. So what can we do action-wise at home? Sometimes thought that supports the new way of being.
Cool. And was that kind of the experiment or the thing that you wanted to kind of lead either my mom or I through?
Yeah, I absolutely can clear a trapped emotion. This is one of the things that I typically do when I do talks or do podcasts live, because it really helps the listener get a sense of like, because you hear energy healing and like, what does that actually mean? Most people who haven't experienced it don't know. And so this is a very practical way of demonstrating it.
Cool. Well, in the non-tradition of son and mom, I tell my mom to be the guinea pig. And she's talked about this. Actually, I don't know if we talked about this. She just actually got surgery, and obviously, I've been talking about holiday stress and like just the weather changes and just how it impacts our bodies. Even if, again, if we don't think about it, it's a part of our life and our routines, depending on where you live. If you don't live in like a Four Seasons winter kind of thing, I know in the hotter places, it's usually the summer, which can be like where you get depression because you're inside hiding from the heat. So it can kind of be in both places.
Mhm.
So that's just a little tidbit. But yeah, I would love to be um,
Observer?
the observer.
Susan, does that feel comfortable for you?
Yes,
Okay. So, first, have you ever witnessed or experienced muscle testing before?
never.
Okay. So, a lot of people may be familiar with this if you've seen a chiropractor or any form of holistic practitioner when they might hold your arm out and ask the body a question, and a strong response is a yes, and a weak response is a no. I use something called the sway test, and if people are curious, you can just Google sway test. Or if you're really interested in emotion code, you can read the emotion code book by Dr. Brad Nelson. Well, he really details this in a beautiful way. It makes it really, really understandable. So, the essence of muscle testing is that we are going to tap into your subconscious mind, which, as we know, everybody's heard of the iceberg metaphor, where the conscious mind is what's sticking out and the unconscious is what's under the water. So your subconscious is your master record keeper. It knows everything about your life, all the way down to like what you had for breakfast in 1994 on September 2nd. Like it's really, really detailed. And I could go even more woo and talk about past life stuff, but we won't do that here. So in a moment, I'll ask permission to connect to your energy field so that I will be muscle testing for you. I'll ask a simple yes, no question, and we'll see what trapped emotion comes up for you. And then we can see when it got stuck too.
Okay,
Okay, sound good?
sure.
All right. So do I have permission to connect to your energy field?
Yes.
All right, so I'll just take a quick moment of silence. Okay. So am I muscle testing for Susan? Yes. So if you're watching this, I think maybe you do this on YouTube. If you're watching, you'll see my body move forward for a yes and backwards for a no. That's the traditional sway test results. Instead of a strong muscle hold, you get a forward sway. Um, and so is there a trapped emotion that we can clear for Susan today? Yes. Um, we'll just do the most important one to clear. Is it in column A? Is it an even row? Is it B1? Is it B3? Is it B5? B5. All right, so the trapped emotion that wants to be cleared for you today is unsupported. So a common one. And we can ask when this got stuck if you want to know more information about it.
Okay,
So tell me how young you are.
like my real age?
Yes.
Okay, it is 57.
Okay. So then I typically just go like halfway through. So around, did this unsupported get stuck before age 25, before 35, before 45, between 45 and 50, 46, 47. So this got stuck about 47. And so I'll clear this out of your field in a moment. And what typically happens is I won't ask you to dive into this now because this is your podcast and not mine. But you can sort of think about like, well, what was going on in my life when I was 47? And you can sense into, was there an area where I didn't feel supported? Just to kind of connect the dots. You don't have to do that. Sometimes my clients will be like, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense because this was going on. And other times it takes a day or two to process, and they have a memory that bubbles up, and they're like, oh, yeah, okay. And sometimes nothing happens, but regardless, the energy gets cleared and moved on. Um, So here's the clearing statement. In traditional emotion code, Dr. Brad recommends running a magnet down the governing meridian, which is runs from, I think, at the tip of your nose or maybe right here, all the way down your back with the intention of clearing the trapped emotion. I don't do that anymore. I just use a clearing statement. I mean, that's what I do for all of my work. So this is what it sounds like. And now delete, uncreate, and destory this trapped emotion of unsupported. And we do this across all time, space, dimension, and reality, all the way to 0 point. And then I double check, did that get cleared? And I get a yes that it did. That's it.
Okay.
Really simple.
Mhm.
And so if someone has, like, so you said like 16, you do that through all of them?
Most of the time, you don't have to know all 16.
Hmm.
Sometimes I have people who want to know every single thing, and we'll take the time to do that in session. But the majority of time, people want to clear as much as they possibly can in their time with me. And so I might be clearing hundreds of energies, just within like tuning into your field, kind of doing a sweep. But there might be more specific things that we need to find through emotion code or the body code system. And body code is it's level 2 training after emotion code, because emotion code is just clearing trapped emotions, and body code has over 1,000 different types of energies that you can identify to clear. Everything from like thought forms and belief systems that are, that we can rewire through things like CBT, but it's really supportive to be able to have the energetic kind of pluck that out. It supports then the action of the CBT work, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, even if we think about feelings in therapy work, it's like once you understand that there are so many feelings other than our basic sad, mad, angry, happy, when you can like dive deeper into like understanding the layers of feelings that you can have can really help you to, move toward healing and transformation and all these different forms of, like you said, like thoughts, even our bodies, because I think a lot of the times we're in our headspace and we forget about our body, we feel it, but then we're like, oh, I'm just sick, or I'm just sore, I worked out, or like all these excuses versus like what memory is being held in your body parts, and how is your mind separating it to sometimes, or more times than not, probably keep you safe, because it takes a lot of work and support. And I always believe that we're, as humans, we heal together in community. And so like sometimes it's easier with another person or a group or whatever works best.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yes. Yeah. So these trapped energies are certainly held in the physical body. So it helps to pull them out, like you were saying, and probably very similar to your work that you do. Just, you're doing that with breath work and experiencing it versus the sort of identifying what it is and then commanding that energy out. But it's all the same.
I say that even with therapy, I'm like, to me, it's like, it's all the same, like the framework of like building relationships. It's just like, again, like my mom said, things, not one thing works for everyone. And so it's like about finding the different things. And that's why it's branched out to so many different forms of therapy, because people have connected with it, it's helped them, and they have helped others. And so I think that's a key reminder for people that, not one thing is going to work for you, and be curious about non-traditional forms of like healing and transformation, because you never know where it's going to be if you're on that hamster wheel of, this is, I have a doctor, there's medications and therapy, and it's like there's so many other things than just those three supports.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, and I think the other piece too is, so I do a short-term therapy model through primary care office. And so it's more episodic. It's usually if something came up or they're experiencing a challenge in their life currently. And so we do short-term therapy. And then I always say to people, it's you come in, you work on that one thing, and you go out in the world and you try it on for size. And I believe that therapy at times can only take us to a certain point, right? And having these other alternatives can bring us down other healing paths as well. And so sometimes it might be a flavor of each one of those to kind of bring someone to their space where they feel more in control, they feel lighter in their body, they may be changing some of their core beliefs that probably weren't theirs to begin with. Like all of these different parts that can really put someone in a very different space versus sitting in therapy for 40 years.
Yes, yes, agreed. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Liz, it was awesome having you on. Do you want to tell the people where they can find you if they're looking for more information?
Sure, yeah, you can find me on my website, essentialhealingwithdrliz.com.
Cool. And
Yeah.
just as a reminder, do you do in-person telehealth or both?
Both. Most of my work is telehealth or over Zoom. And I do, if people are local, I'm in North Carolina, I'm happy to meet somebody in my office as well. I go there 1 day a week.
Great.
Right. So again, thanks for being on. And for our listeners, if you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to leave them and we can pass them on to Dr. Liz. And if there's a big interest, I mean, I'm sure we'll definitely have you back on because I think it's great to have further conversations because this is just the beginning. And there's just, I know there's so much more that you have that people can benefit from.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful to speak to both of you today.
You too. Thank you.
And
you.
everyone else, take care.
Yeah.